One of the most rewarding things that I think I've done involved the 8 years I spent with the National Farm Worker Ministry. NFWM over the years became an organization with a mission to advocate for and to work with the migrants in the fields, and in trying to improve the conditions that the farm workers labored under. Our ability is to get inside of boardrooms and inside the corporate headquarters where the real decision makers about food and pricing operate. But basically, we're supporting the worker-led efforts that come from the people themselves. And it provides an opportunity to work directly for justice and for those who are struggling themselves to organize and empower themselves and work for the efforts to improve their own living and working conditions. There are some 2.5 million farm workers in the fields, laboring day after day. It is these men and women, and often children, who provide the food for our tables, our restaurants, and the living that we enjoy as American citizens. So the food chain is lengthy, but the bottom of that food chain is the worker in the fields. I have been in a rally in Toledo, Ohio. I've been picketing in Portland, Oregon at the Dairy Gold production plant. I have been to the lettuce fields in Yuma, Arizona. And it's the part of the advocacy, the part of our ability to be with the farm workers themselves and to hear the stories that they have to tell. They request our support, and we supply that in person and on the scene with them. And that's a great, it's a great advantage and a great learning experience. Besides the interest in the farm workers themselves, the fact that they're migrants means that NFWM has a focus as well on the United States immigration policies. And one of the things I did in the course of those 8 years was to make a trip to the border wall in the United States. So we stayed in Nogales, USA, in Arizona, and we crossed the border into Nogales, Mexico. And it was an experience of learning that I will never forget. I think all of us in the group of 12 went with open minds and hearts to look and listen and understand the motives for people in crossing the border. They were undertaking a risk like no other, and it's a decision that nobody makes lightly, but it has something to say about the conditions in the countries from which they come. They're journeying by land, and they're walking most of the way with families as single people, mothers with children, fathers with children, children on their own searching for their parents eventually, hoping to make it to the United States. They experience hardship and death. The very first day that we were in the United States on the American side, we took a path that was a known migrant path. And we did it in broad daylight, and we stopped at a couple of places along the way where people in migration had stopped before we did. And things that they were leaving behind because they simply couldn't carry them any further. Empty water bottles, clothing pieces that they just dropped along the way to lighten the load. And it was a place to stop and think. The woman who accompanied us on that trip, partly across the Arizona desert, and she was part of a group of people known as the Green Valley Samaritans, after the story of the Samaritan woman in the New Testament, where Jesus told the parable about the good person who stopped to aid the beaten up traveler. And they go out into the Arizona desert frequently and fill water containers. That's the water is essential, and that's part of the weight that those travelers of the desert carry with them. If they meet migrants traveling, they try to dissuade them from continuing the journey, telling them how difficult it is to keep going. If they're in some distress because of blisters on their feet or fatigue or a turned ankle or something, they will call and call for help. And many times the travelers themselves are simply too worried to go on, and so the Border Patrol is called, and they will deal with it from there. But there's a friendly relationship between the border people and the Samaritan people. They're both doing good work, each in their own way, and taking care of families and so forth. It's human beings deserving of care no matter what. Every person has a right to a living in his or her own country, but every person also has a right to migrate if that first right is not possible in their own country. The country to which they're coming, in our case the United States, has a right to control its borders. It also has an obligation to treat people who cross with dignity and to respect them as human beings. And it has a right to make the laws by which everybody is expected to live. The problem for us in recent years is both the surge that we're experiencing at the border, but it's also the inability of Congress to legislate anew for border control. And so there's that push and pull is on both sides, and both sides have rights and both sides have obligations. It's not just a U.S. and south of the border kind of conflict. It's a worldwide phenomenon. There are so many millions of people in motion across the world, and all for the same basic reasons. It's been a journey with so many good people It's why I think I entered this congregation in the first place. It is my life, and it's focused on those core values that we have as a congregation, and particularly education for me, in such a variety of ways. I've always felt a sense of belonging and a sense of support from the community. Some things I've been asked to do, and some things I have volunteered to do, and it's been a blessing to me, as well as a privilege for me, because it has kept me growing and learning, and being the person I hope that I am because of it.